episode was a kind of a Q&A session, which we'll get into in a moment. But to begin and to welcome Michi to the show, Michi, can you briefly outline how and when you got into sim racing?
I basically got into sim racing in December 2005 with a colleague of mine getting a G25, and back in the day, Izzy, or the Izzy Corporation, gave a demo version of their brand new R Factor 1 with it.
Yep.
So he got into sim racing there, and he dragged me into this real sim racing at that point. But the initial start of racing games is back then with EA Sports F1 2000. That is where I started the real thing, so to say.
Okay. And primarily on PC. Have you ever played on console as well, or?
With my friend, obviously, I had one or other go at the console in F1. Well, there was another F1 game, I think F1 2003, which he had on the PlayStation 2 or something, but I never found the PlayStation or the console to be somewhat eligible for sim racing at all.
Okay. And in terms of what you're doing now I know that you're involved in a team, so can you explain your team ACR Zack Speed and also Avid Chronic Racing, and how did you come to join the teams?
That was probably a longer story, but to outline it, I went into Formula Sim Racing in 2014 with a Venus Project Racing team.
Yeah.
And things didn't go too well, and at the end of the day, the team was about to fall apart, and we were like, okay, let's just do the last 2 or 3 races here in Ace. And in the very last race, I had like a good feature race and a good sprint race, and that actually brought Avid Chronic Racing on the plan, saying, hey, what about you joining us for 2015? I'm like, well, yeah, good point. I think my current team will fall apart, and otherwise I got nowhere to go, so here we are. And well, what happened then is Chris Kopp went to FSR presidency and asked me to somewhat help him out on the day-to-day business, so he could some sort of separate his positions.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I don't know. I took lead of the team in 2016, carried the lead in 2017, and while in that year, we had a merge together with VM Motorsports, the team with Rudy van Buren in it.
Yep.
And after the merge, yeah, we had a go at potential sponsors and potential partnerships, and that is where Zaxby came into the play. So with Zaxby being a GT3 team here in Germany, located very near to the Nürburgring, with over 50 years of competitive racing and over 400 race wins and 22 championships won. They obviously have a lot of experience, and yeah, we are their official esports team, and so we have a little bit of a separation inside the team. Like saying the top is ACR Saxby or Avid Chronic Racing Saxby, so to say.
Yeah.
And this is obviously the place where you want to be. So the other guys in the standard ACR team are trying to pull their way up to get this some sort of benefit or some sort of label as being high performant.
Okay, interesting. And I noted that in Race Room there's an old Zack Speed Capri from back in the day, and I guess basically that's the same Zack Speed. And I somehow thought, I remember looking it up, I thought that Zack Speed as a team, as an organization, was actually gone, but I believe it still exists now today. Is it so?
Yeah, it's the very same team. Like 2 weeks ago, they were celebrating, or 1 week ago, they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the team at the Nürburgring, together with the ADAC GT Masters.
Yeah.
And Saxby has a 50-year existence, had 6 or 7 years in Formula 1, also raced this Ford Capri, as you mentioned. So, yeah, they have quite a bit of history going on. And obviously we are extremely delighted and happy to join them.
Okay, very interesting. I looked at the website earlier, the German website, and I guess in German language mostly, and I'll include a link to the website in the description below for those who want to check it out, because you can see the esports elements and also going all the way back to the Zack Speed Capri. So it's quite interesting. Now, yesterday, Mike posted a video on his channel where he asked for people to pose questions for Michi to answer. So, Mike, if you could lead with the questions, and what I've done is I've added the person's name there, and then I've tried to break the questions down. So, Mike, if you could start with the first question from Carl Sampson.
Sure, yeah. So Carl Sampson wanted to ask you, Michi, and I know this is going to be difficult. You might actually want to answer this in years instead of hours, but how many hours did it take you to get to alien level? And I know that's a tough one to answer because there's no, definitive level where you become an alien, but let's maybe rephrase that and say how much sim racing did it take you to get to where you are today? Like, is this something you do 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day, and for how many years have you done that?
To sum it down in a nutshell, a lot. I mean, skill is something you should have when trying to get up to speed, when you want to get up to a certain level. But obviously skill only develops and shows its full potential if you put excessive work in it. So at the very first, I was just doing stuff for fun. But at some point, despite being in the private league for the first 7 years of the career, so to say, I found out that I was like extremely down when things didn't go well, or I was happy if I came second or first. And at some point, you were starting to look at details. You were watching F1 closely, and you were like, yeah, that what those guys are doing, I want to do so much. And then you, as you say, you keep sitting and put hours of work in, and then at some point, when there is the opportunity, you need to be there, and that is what happened to me. I think my major breakthrough was the World Fastest Gamer final in R Factor 2, and it was like, qualifying for the second round in the Sandfort was so intensely close. Like, I was sitting there at the day, and I was having a drink in the evening, and I knew exactly that the final few hours, people will go and test again. And as it stands, with a good 3 or 4 hours to go in the qualifying, which was going on for an entire week, I found myself in P21 with the top 20 to proceed to the race event and to the race shootout.
Mm-hmm.
And I was separated by P20, which was Olli Pakala, by 1,000th of a second.
Wow.
Really?
And I was like, no, I'm not going to drop out of this top 20 because of 1,000th of a second,
Yeah.
And at some point, with 40 minutes to go, there was this one lap that's where I got my stuff together, and I improved by half a tenth or a tenth, but it brought me up to P11, which meant I was going to be in the top 20 shootout for the top 5 to proceed in the finals.
Yeah.
And back in the day, then the qualifying went extremely well. I started 5th or 4th. Now I start the 4th, and kept the position, and that was like the ticket for the final. And I want to point out that this basically does not have to do with that with skill at that moment. Also in that level, it's about that luck that you get this one lap in those 15 minutes of qualifying that brings you up into the top 5. Because overtaking that car was literally ridiculously difficult. And obviously, with the top 20 guys over 6,000 people, you're not racing against some kind of unexperienced guy. So everyone that was in the top 20 shootout knew exactly what he was doing. And to be part of that group actually was very delighting. But as you say, before that, you do numbers of hours in the sim. Sometimes you sit there 3, 4, 5 hours, and then you look at the data from the first stint, and you look at the Motec files from the last stint, and you compare each other, and you see yourself progressing on that one track with that one car. and at some point you need to develop to spread that skill, or to spread all that activity on the numbers of cars. So not only Formula One, but also GT, also other cars and stuff. And yeah, at some point develop some kind of a feeling and some kind of, somehow you simply jump in and you know exactly what to do. And yeah, that is probably the bonus and the result of continuously numbers of hours of work being put in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lots and lots of work, and you're seeing the results of all that hard work, so good for you. Next question, also from Carl Sampson, is does your skill set translate across different sims? So, I'm looking at your channel right now, and there seems to be a heavy focus on R Factor 2, and obviously you do iRacing, but does your skill set translate across different sims the same, or is there some sims that you're better at than others?
The clear answer is that is no. It just does not transfer from one sim to another. And as you mentioned, my channel, yes, I'm a heavy R Factor 2 guy. Like, this is the sim where I feel the best, or where I feel comfortable with the most. And probably that's the reason why I'm so good at it. Right there, I'm racing Formula Sim racing in the World Championship level. I'm a P5 guy in the World Championship there, so that is top notch on that point. But on the other hand, when you look at what's happening at iRacing lately, and it's not like I've just done a couple of races, I'm into iRacing since, like, on a more professional way, since a good 7 or 8 months. And yet I was up to 3,000 iRating, and I dropped again a little bit, which had a little bit of to do with technical issues also, but I saw other people being up to 5.5 or even 6,000 of iRating within 2 or 3 months, because winning races, because they're outstandingly good on iRacing, and I'm not. I have to admit that. So it was just this week where a former teammate of mine, Pascal Sturgis, who is running the Blancpain or the VRS Sprint Series or Endurance Series on World Championship level. So he has that World Championship Pro level license, and he was in the IMSA Sports Car Championship. And I haven't had a bad run at all. Like, I was feeling comfortable with what I was doing, and I felt like operating at the level where I should be operating. And I came fourth, but after 45 minutes, I had a 30-second gap to Gerges. So on iRacing, I'm missing a mile on pace. And now people can start arguing whether whether I'm really that good, because something that makes real aliens the aliens is that they are good in wherever they are. So Martin Stefanko, obviously, he's a teammate of AZ at Saxpeed. He raced the World Championship with me last year, got the first win for the team. I didn't get it. He also races Assetto Corsa Virtual GP. He's current reigning champion there. Had a drive in a real Formula 2.0 around Most or Brno. I've kind of forgot where it was. And now he has been picked up by the Haas F1 team for F1 Esports Series. So he's proven himself to be quick in all 3 sims. And a reason why I didn't try for the F1 Esports thing is because, this F1 2017 is a nice to play game. But for me, it's a game rather than a sim. And the sim racing also means, you've seen Oli Pakala, Enzo Bonito, and people also racing the F1 Esports and proving themselves that they're quick there. So I'll just need to get working to get the final transmission though. And now, you know what? I can put on hours and hours and hours, and maybe at some point I'm going to start increasing the pace everywhere.
Right.
And Michi, sorry, Mike. Davey. Michi, I'm just thinking out loud. R Factor 2 is a simulation, as is iRacing. So in terms of the 2 titles, are you able to pinpoint the differences in the two, that whereas you're kind of you're better in R Factor 2? Is it the feel of the game, or is it the setup options, or any idea why you think you're a bit slower in one than the other?
I think in iRacing, the tire model is the most important, but also the most difficult part of
Okay.
the physics to understand. In R Factor 2, I can have a look at the live temperature of the tire, I can have a look into Motec files, very easy. And so I see very, very fast what's going on them tires. For example, I had just that race yesterday with a Nissan GTR.
Yeah.
Once you were just a little pushing, the temperatures immediately went 170, 180, and you were like eating your rubber off the tires because of thermal degradation very quick.
Yeah.
Whereas in iRacing, when you keep the temperature in a certain stage and like not push that hard, you can run them tires endlessly long.
Really?
Which is very important when it comes down to Formula Sim racing these days, because here you're talking about you need to do a number of laps on a certain tire, and if you don't reach that, your strategy is completely game over.
Yeah.
So you really need to do that tire management and stuff. Sorry. So when you come down to iRacing, then the only thing you can see is the number of percentage of the tire that has been gone and some sort of temperature at the point where you took them off the car. And there it's like there's no telemetry right now in the car where you can read out live tire data and stuff. So you can also only look into Atlas telemetry files, which you then have to some sort of convert to Motec files.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more difficult. And at the end of the day, it's just that iRacing feels like driving on ice sometimes. So the most of the cars are pretty understeery. And also once your car started to slide, it's like incredibly hard, if not sometimes just impossible to catch that slide, to catch that spin. And when you slide, you lit up your rear tires or the tires itself, when they lose even more grip for the next 7 or 8 corners, depending on how easy you get them to cool down again.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that comes with focusing on iRacing only.
Yes.
Like, I wanna point out Gerges again. Back in the day, he was with me in R Factor 2 racing Formula Sim racing in Ace. In that year where I won that championship in Ace, he was my teammate, my real teammate in the very same car on the very same team. And it's not like he hasn't had a chance against me, but it was, I always was that little bit better, snatching, I think 6 or 7 wins to the season, where he got just 1, so to say. I'm not pinpointing at all, but
yeah, just an example.
Yeah, it was quite apparent that we were some sort of the same skill level, same speed level. And now, remember what I just said about the IMSA race. He outraced me by 30 seconds, and he outqualified me by 1.5 seconds. So there is no skill difference in between, I would say. If you look at the drivers, it suits him better.
Yeah.
Or is it mean too much down in R Factor 2 because of FSR still? If I would stop racing R Factor 2 and like do 5 or 6 hours of practice only on iRacing every day, I might be up to that speed at some point too.
Yeah.
But it's just since my main duties is R Factor 2, I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting interesting that you can outline the strengths of both. That's very interesting, actually. Yeah. And now, Mike.
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to combine 2 questions here, because we had quite a few questions about setups, and to most of us, setups are kind of the dark art, and we can understand racing lines and things like that, but setups is where it gets kind of mysterious in our head. So Carl and Tim basically asking the same question, and I want to, before I get into the question, I'll say that, guys, if you're listening to this and you want to know more about setups, Michi generally will go through setups and live stream his setup work before he gets into a race. So make sure you subscribe to Michi, and he'll help you with setups just by watching him do it. But Tim and Carl are kind of asking the same question here. How long do you spend setting up your car, and what's kind of your process in building a setup? And then also, how much time does that translate to? So we'll take Spa as an example. So if you start out at Spa in your favorite car, be it the, you know, Zaxby's Mercedes or something like that, and you start your setup, how much time do you stand to gain? Is it 2 seconds? Is it 5 seconds between the baseline setup and when you're finished your setup?
That depends on a lot of things, and I'm gonna do it for the case if I do know the car very well. Saying like I've done half season under my belt, and now there's just another race coming up. So on every car, and I tend to call it glitches, despite it obviously isn't a glitch in that sense, but every car has got its well-known glitch. Like for example, the let me see. Basically, the FSR car, one of the older FSR cars, actually always used 2 or 3 clicks more front wing than rear wing in order to operate in a good balance. That is some very iconic characterization of this specific car. You know, if you go in another Formula 1 car, it might be the rear wing that always has to be 1 or 2 clicks higher than the front wing to have the balance where it is. So on those things, you do not spend a lot of time, basically. But let's say when it comes down to Spa, and you go from baseline, what I often do is, especially in iRacing, I'll just drive the baseline and do a lot of trial and error. Whereas in R Factor 2, I would start dialing some things in of which I do think that they work. So I go for a good aero package. Yeah, the first thing I probably do is aero, and then I fix the gearing, and then I start working on the balance. So first of all, if I have a general understeer in the car that appears in slow corners, I know that I have to fix it by the suspension, because in slow corners the aerodynamics is not working too much because of the low speed. And then you know that you have to look for the mechanical grip to be right, and the mechanical grip is always tires in combination with the suspension. However, if you have like an okay feeling car in slow corners, but you start oversteering a lot in fast corners, then you want to decrease the front wing maybe, because in high speed area, the wing or the aerodynamical grip is dominant over the mechanical grip. Obviously, they combine each other again, but usually the mechanical grip should nowhere be able to cause understeer or excessive oversteer in fast speed corners, except when you have such a low car that the aerodynamics push down the car so much that you start grinding out like mad. Then obviously excessive understeer or oversteer could be the case. But yeah, normally you would just balance the car in high speed section with the wings, and in low speed areas with the suspension, and then you try to find a good benefit or a good combination of both for the entire track. So, and that obviously, sometimes it could go very quick. Sometimes it just takes a little longer. For example, if we go to Spa, we do have a lot of fast speed corners, I want to say. So what you want to have is a car that is good on weight transfer, especially because there's a lot of chicanes also. Like Eau Rouge is very important for weight transfer. Lecombe, the 3-corner combination for
Yeah.
after the long straight. And then there is Rivage, where you go down the hill and the weight always tries to make the rear end very light. So you need some dampers that keep the weight sitting at the rear, so the rear doesn't step out. Stuff like that, and then there is Pujon, where you need the car's suspension to be rigid enough to not grind out, and at the very same time, there are the other quick and fast corners where you need the soft suspension to do a good weight transfer, and also to have a good possibility of the car to carry speed through a corner. So, yeah, as you can see, setup always means compromise and balance between one and two things. Can't go with 350 kph but have massive downforce in the corners. So there you go.
Great. So that was a tough question. And our first question from the live stream actually should be somewhat of an easy one. Are you excited for Assetto Corsa Competizione?
That is a difficult question, because I have seen numbers of screenshots by Assetto Corsa itself. I've seen a lot of thoughts being thrown towards it from the sim pit, and I'm generally just of the opinion from the first looks, because Sean Cole was driving the Competizione Beta thing at E3 this year, and from the first looks, it just looks like another Assetto Corsa with advanced graphics. And I'm not too big of a fan of Assetto Corsa. It has some nice features. I do like the time deltas. I do like the way setup is done, and setup can be adjusted there. But I'm in a big disgrace with the physics, and obviously with the online netcode, because cars are teleporting back and forth if you're going straight. So basically you cannot really overtake out of the slipstream, especially not when it's like so close that you really have to be in the slipstream for the very last millimeter before pulling out for the braking zone. In that point, Assetto Corsa is really bad simulation to race. Furthermore, I saw that they are introducing, I think, 6 different categories of rating, and I'm like, iRacing, and it's iRating and safety rating and time trial rating. That as a baseline, or if you take that as a ground to argue, sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense. You go off track by a millimeter, and then you do that for 16 times, and it's not like gaining you a 10th over the course of the race, and you're being considered worth for disqualification. Like, okay. And also, when you get punted in the rear without having any chance to avoid a crash in iRacing, you get noted for incidents, and you're like, well, I couldn't have done anything, but you are being noted as a bad driver or as an unsafe driver. And on the other hand, I mean, it's kind of interesting to see what they are planning to do with those ratings there. So I'm gonna be up for it. But yeah, I'm not expecting the most exciting sim ever. I mean, expectations are high, just like with Project Cars 2. And to me, Project Cars 2 was no bigger thing than Project Cars 1, and to me that sim definitely flopped. For others it probably didn't, but for me it flopped. And yeah, I just hope for the entire branch that this doesn't happen with Competizione.
Right. That's very interesting to hear, and it kind of ties nicely into another question. This one is from Chuck Does Hot Laps. Chuck has asked what your top three simulators are. So we've already talked about R Factor 2, we talked about iRacing. I'm curious what you would put at number three if you're not a fan of Assetto Corsa. What else is in your top simulators list?
A race room, a racing experience.
Okay.
That sim has been improved over the past couple of 2 years or 3 years and month. It started out feeling arcadey, but meanwhile, the cars feel kind of like they should feel from what I think they should feel. And they are great on the sounds. Like the iconic sounds of some cars on a race room is like the best overall sims.
Yeah, I agree. It's fantastic. We had a couple of the guys from Sector 3 and Race Room on our podcast, I guess a month ago, and it was very interesting to hear the process that they went through to create, like the level of detail that they're doing behind the scenes for Race Room is amazing. So nice to hear that it's getting recognition from top level drivers like yourself, Michi. Jonathan Straitman has a question about the quality of the sim rig, how important it is to lap times. So I believe you run a G29, and that's considered by some to be consumer grade, but you're out there kicking butt on just about any sim racer in the world. So maybe I'll ask the question in two parts. One, how important do you think a sim rig is to your lap times? And two, what do you see the top level guys driving? Are they more inclined to spend thousands and thousands of euro on their setup, or are they running sort of simpler setups like yourself?
There's two type of personalities, but to answer the first question first, I think high quality equipment and high quality and expensive sim racing rigs do give you the opportunity to make more use of your skills. Saying if you're a person that needs a lot of force feedback to really feel the car, then you'll probably be all right with a direct drive wheel. Whereas if you have a native thought or a native feel for a car and what it actually does without feeling a lot, just by looking on the screen and by hearing them from the headphones, a G29 might be fair enough for you. And I'm not being able to put myself in either category because I haven't had a high quality rig ever here at home. And I'm not going to count like the 10 minutes I did a direct drive wheel on the Sim Racing Expo last year. So to really have a conclusion on that, I would need to have my own rig, which I'm starting to save money right now. So in my opinion, a good sim racer or a highly experienced and skilled sim racer can be fast on any rig. I think point proven is Rudy van Buren winning the world fastest gamer on G29. So cannot argue around that. On the other hand, I do know that especially for iRacing, I want to say the Porsche 911 GTE Cup car, I tend to say it has a ridiculous brake range, saying if you press the pedal 48%, you miss the corner. If you brake it 50, 52, you're spot on. If you brake 55%, you lock up and miss the corner again. So there's just some slight room, or some slight window where you have to be in the braking performance. And on a G25 or G29, I basically removed the fake load cell brake or the brake pad from the G29 and put it into the clutch because I could not deal with it. And with that potentiometer being in place on the brake pedal, to be in that window consecutively, consistently, is incredibly hard. So the body or the human body and its brain is designed to have a certain amount of muscle force being applied to a pedal in its memory a lot more easier than a certain angle of your foot. in terms of position. So the amount of muscle force being applied to something is a lot easier to replicate brain-wise, and obviously therefore doing-wise. So that I would think a load cell brake will improve my driving a lot. Because I'm not bad, I can get it done for like 85% of the time, but it is enough to like lock up the brakes in the rear for once and spin out and crash. And it's my personal task to minimize that gap. And I would say proper brake pedal or proper pedals would help me, especially with a load cell brake. And also when those brakes can give feedback, they would help me to get in that range where it would be like 95-96% consistent. So a lot more safety, a lot more what's the word? Not durability, the other reliability. That was a lot more reliability to my own skill.
Great. Norman Robinson has a question about any other hardware you use for your sim racing setup, and you kind of touched on this, single versus triple screen, direct drive, VR, that kind of thing. I know you don't run any of those things, but let's just follow up your last answer. So you said you're saving up a bit of money. What's going to be the order you buy in? What's top priority for you? Are you going for a load cell first, then a direct drive wheel, and then maybe VR in the future, or what are your priorities for your upgrades to your rig?
Funny enough, I just had a talk about that 2 or 3 days ago with a friend, and I was like, I'm not going to put up any order where to buy stuff. I'm more like to put to buy all things in one day, and here's the reasoning. I have in mind to get a load cell brake. What I would need for that is a solid rig. To like right now I'm on a bureau chair on rails or on rolls. If I would have a load cell brake, I would like immediately crash into the board behind me because of me pushing away from the desk. So I need a rig. I need a solid rig for a load cell brake, and I think a solid rig, an alloy rig, is also appreciated for the forces being generated by a DD wheel. With that being said, I would also need a second computer because I cannot move around desktops or desktop screens every single time I want to hop in the race or go back to the office work as being a ACR Saxby team manager and team owner. So I would need a new PC. I would need a new gaming PC with triple screens with a lot of power. And then there is the next point, like, do you set up both machines the very same way and keep synchronizing them? No, of course not. So the next thing I would need is a network area storage where I can put on the simulators on, so I can feed them with data either from the office PC or from the gaming rig PC. And when you tot up the totals, you could spend a 6, 7, 8,000 euro. And you know what? Without every equipment being in place from day one, a purchase of other things is kind of useless because I cannot use them individually without them. Let's saying I cannot make use of the rig the way I want without my network area storage, because I would have to every single time replug some cables or replug some screens or some keyboard or whatever, and it's just not reasonable to do it. So if I want to get an upgrade on my rig, I buy everything out of the box and not step by step.
Yes. So you have an integrated solution for both sim racing and your team management activities.
Exactly. Like I would have, I already have a place in mind where to put the rig and then where to adjust the desktop for it. So my room's design's gonna change a bit, and I already made up my mind how I put this thing together, how I'm wanting to run the business. If I get I do not want to run with USB sticks from PC1 to PC2 if I get sent a setup by internet or something. I just want to open the computer where I received it, put it on a network area storage, have it available on the other machine. That is my solution for that. It's all about the efficiency, and efficiency sometimes is a bit expensive.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of technical hurdles to overcome. All right, Michi, I've got two more questions from that came in the comments to my previous video, and then one that just came in on the live stream. The one from the live stream is, are you looking forward to the iRacing damage model? Do you think that's going to help things or hurt things in iRacing?
I'm not quite sure, because meanwhile, when racing in other races and you look at the broken netcode, then you have contact with the car and nothing happens. You not even get noted an incident, and the next time there is 50 centimeter space between your car and another car, and both glitch together and having the worst damage of all time, being unable to race. And you look at the footage and say there was not even meant to be contact, so why did it happen? So I would suggest to fix the netcode first and then take care about damage models.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Kate, now we got a couple questions about force feedback settings. A lot of people wondering what you run, because it's known to us, sort of common or pleb sim racers, that the higher up guys like yourself run very, very low force feedback. And do you have anything turned on except some basic curb rumble, or do you pretty much run no force feedback? What are your settings like?
Difficult. I mean, I was reluctant to reduce the force of the spring. What I usually had was 100% spring feedback on the profiler, but I turned that to 0, so the wheel became super easy to turn. But that is also the point where you start feeling the littlest and smallest bump, at least on a G29. So it took me a while to get used to that, but basically what I do is do not run any centering spring forces, like to completely erase that, and only run the effect. So the car FFB molds, a little bit of smoothing so it doesn't rattle all the way down, and a little bit of minimum torque. That is how I would say is an effective force feedback setup. So you do feel the effects of the car bouncing on the curb, bouncing on the bumps on the street. You do feel the racetrack, but nothing else.
Right. There you go, guys. So keep it low. And then the final question I have for you, Michi, and I'm going to kind of divide it into two. Norman Robinson asked, what's your post-race routine like? And I believe it's pronounced Rorik asked how you get ready for the day. So can you talk to us? Let's say you have a big race, you're going to be live streaming it. Perhaps it's a league race or something like that. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do to prepare for the race? Do you sit down and have a cup of coffee and clear your mind first, or do you get into your rig early and start running laps to get a feel for things? Or what's your build up like leading into a race? And then the second part of the question is, what do you do after? Do you immediately decompress and go for a walk, or do you sit down and look at telemetry? What's your routine like around a race?
Usually for a kind of unimportant race, let's say just a practice race, or let's say just a random iRacing race, to me, I simply hop in, do the stuff, and either be happy or a little bit depressed of the result in the end. If it comes down to FSR, it's a total different story. So the qualifying starts 19:30, with the race starts 20:0. Usually, the last time in the day I would eat is 3:30, or 4 p.m. I usually drink liters of coffee, not just cups of coffee, but liters. I also stopped drinking coffee after 5 p.m. So my body has the chance to, go for toilet and stuff, and then be some sort of, well, sounds weird, but some sort of empty, so that I do not need to pee during the race and stuff like that. And then I make up ready for drinks with a little bit of electrolytes in it, a good liter for the race, for the entire event. And yeah, I'm gonna mostly, or at least 3/4 of the liter I drink during the race, and the rest of it afterwards. And then I, can go to toilet again, and like things become normal again. But this entire build up is meant to be, so I am like not bothered with non-racing things at all. Sometimes, depending on how nervous I am, I start listening to music a good half an hour before I go into practice. Then I take like practice session, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, to build up to speed. And then I want to be in that zone, being in the tunnel, being in the zone, stuff like that. After the race, to be honest, most of the time I cannot be asked looking at any data or starting doing any analysis. Like, only obviously with a team, you're saying, "Oh, it was bad to pit that early or pit that late," or stuff like that. Just common little post-race talks, like you would see it in the ceremony waiting room in real F1 as well. But other than that, it depends really. Like, if I really had a bad result, I can sit myself into the shower and just let the water rain over me for 10-15 minutes, closing the eyes, trying to somehow work around what's going on in my head, or have a walk afterwards. If the race would be extremely good, I could also turn up the music and dance around in the house, depending really on the result.
Yeah.
But obviously, good results make me a lot happier. I tend to look at the one or other things from broadcasts. But after a race, I really never can turn down. There's so much adrenaline in the body. Still, the race ended at 10 p.m. and sometimes I still can't sleep at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., stuff like that. Yeah, and for World Fastest Game, it was so intense. That real final where Rudy van Buren in the end won the race, oh, good God, my body was shaking like 3 hours before the qualifying. And I was like, that was something where I put on my earplugs, I grabbed my phone, and I put on the flight mode so no one was bothering me whatsoever, and I was having a 2-hour walk with music around the river here in the local city. I just did not know. I couldn't sit still for a second. I was so pumped up with nervosity and stuff. Yeah, so you have to build a workaround for that.
That's interesting. And Michi, if I can ask, I noticed from your live stream yesterday of the World Endurance Championship qualifier, you were running quite a low field of view. So if you're in a packed race, a busy race, in terms of being aware of what's around you, are you looking left or right, or are you depending on feedback from the wheel if somebody should bump into you, or are you focusing on the audio? For example, you're running a single screen, so not triples and not VR mostly. So how do you then keep track of what's around you? Is it audio mostly, or?
Yeah, it's mostly audio and the track awareness, I want to say. Sometimes this might not be enough. However, when being in the middle of the corner, I'm not ready to swap views, to look left and right. Could do it on the straight sometimes, but usually do not do it at all. I'm disadvantaged there, to be honest. People also told me like it would be better to to have a triple or something, but right now my rig is not ready for that.
No.
And at the end of the day, I'll only do it in about track awareness. I put myself or I put my car in a position of which I do know that there is enough space for one and a half car width on the inside or outside. And then I stick to my line to be very clear, to be very very obvious in my doing, so to say. And then I care a lot about sound. So the exterior sound is extremely important to myself, and running 7.1 Dolby surround headphones, that helps a lot.
Of course, yeah.
To determine whether the car is right ahead, right to the side, or right behind.
Good point.
So yeah, that is how I some sort of making over the disadvantage of not being on VR or triple screen.
Yeah. So you have, sorry, your headphones are some kind of native 5.1 or 7.1 system, not some virtualized in software.
No, they are, as you say, native, which is very important. And at some point, I started racing with headphones. And if I'm not racing with headphones, I'm like a good half a second slower for some reason. It's just, you're focusing so much on sounds.
Yeah.
Like a good sim racer takes advantage from every little thing he gets. And remember, we are missing that some sort of G-forces that can be felt in the real car.
Yes.
And the voices in the real car are so loud anyway. So you have to try to be at least good enough on the sound, equal enough on the sound, equal enough on the feeling of the wheel. And you have then to be, solid and own enough in order to make that disadvantage of missing G-forces being gone.
All right, we got one last question from chat here, and I think this would be a good way to start sort of winding towards the end of the podcast. Could sim racing become a full-time job for you? And, or I guess it sort of translates into, what's the bigger picture for you in sim racing? Where do you see yourself in a year or 5 years or 10 years from now?
It's a tough one. I'll be brutally honest right now. I would love to drop my real life job at some point and earn my money from streaming dash sim racing. That would be the most optimal thing. I want to say a big thank you to all the guys that are supporting me right now, and either whether this is supporting the stream while being a follower or subscriber on YouTube and Twitch. I want to say a big shout out to Michael Clark. That guy puts me into challenges, gives me content to stream, and honors my work monetary wise extremely a lot. I owe him so much, to be honest. On the other side, yes, of course, I'm doing streaming obviously in the first place for the exposure of the team, to be honest. Secondary, also for my personal happiness, because I like being some sort of an example to someone. Obviously, I do enjoy people like looking up to me, whereas I still consider myself being an average sim racer. I'm not feeling like I'm a super alien or something, because I'm not. I might agree that I am quick, yes, I do know about that, but it's not like, losing the ground under the feet and starting to fly and be arrogant. I'm not that type of person. I try to relocate myself very, very on point where I am and where I am not. At least I'm trying to do so. So yeah, obviously I would love to grow my Patreon program. I got some perks in there as well, where you get access to setup guides, where you get discount on guided driving lessons. So I'm also giving lessons on driving, working on a setup, working on a driving line, working on overtaking or battling So wherever you feel you got a weakness, I try to obviously be there and offer my services for an hour. And I usually charge a €35 for that, and that includes getting content, trying to organize a server, stuff like that. So all costs covered. And obviously, I'm not cutting off after 60 minutes because I said, oh, hour is gone. No. Obviously, we have soft boundaries there, so we can extend to, let's say, 70 or even 75 minutes if it's kind of obvious that the next 5 or 10 minutes after the 60-minute mark are very useful or very important for the success of the session. Yeah, I want to grow my Patreon program so that I can interfere a lot more with the community. But that obviously needs to give me some benefit on it because I'm extremely time limited right now, and that is also the reason why I do charge my lessons. Because, you know, right now I have an 8 to 5 job, and when I come home, I keep working for ACR or for myself until like 1, 2, or 3 a.m. in the morning, and then get 3 to 5 hours sleep and go all over then again for the entire week. So time is
work.
Yeah, time is very rare. Time is very valuable at that point, and I think you would not regret investing in yourself. So it's a combination of that. Obviously, I do not like putting myself in the spotlight, saying, "Hey, I'm offering services," but charging money for it. Because I think, you know, doing some own advertising sometimes is a bit, but you know, you have to do it sometimes. And yeah, so where I do see myself in 1 year, probably still where I am right now, because it takes a lot more time to build a big community. Saw that at the Simpit, who had started back from zero again 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Sean did, yeah, true.
Sean had to start all over again, and because I'm working together with him and also sometimes being considered part of the Simpit, which I appreciate a lot.
Yeah, great, actually.
Yeah, he's still, you know, he was in break even just after a very long period of time. And right now I'm nowhere break even. So yeah, obviously I would love to grow my own living from sim racing and streaming. I think I would have the potential for it, and also would have the time and dedication for it. But it's also